Real stories, real people.
When my aunt and uncle asked me to house sit for the weekend and look after their small white dog, Daisy, I didn't hesitate. They lived in a beautiful 2-story home just outside Bangor, Maine, surrounded by pine trees and long gravel roads. Daisy was a quiet Havanese who mostly slept near my feet. The first night was peaceful. I fed her, locked the doors, and went downstairs to play video games in their finished basement. Daisy followed me, curled up on the carpet near my chair, and dozed off. Everything about that night felt calm until it didn't. I'd been playing for maybe an hour when Daisy suddenly lifted her head, ears straight, eyes locked toward the dark boiler room. Her low growl broke the silence. I paused the game, waiting to hear what she heard. Nothing, just the quiet hum of the furnace. Still, her focus didn't shift. I turned off the sound completely, listening harder. My pulse slowed, my stomach tightening. "It's okay," I whispered, but Daisy didn't move. Her nose twitched, and she let out a short, uneasy whine. I couldn't see anything beyond that open doorway, just blackness, heavy and still. After a full minute, I forced a laugh, convincing myself it was nothing, maybe a mouse or a pipe clicking. I saved my game and stood up, suddenly aware of how quiet the house had become. Even the wind outside had stopped. I called Daisy softly, but she stayed frozen, staring toward that same dark doorway. I couldn't explain why, but something about the silence felt wrong, like the air itself was heavier. I grabbed my phone, flashlight, and pointed it at the boiler room, sweeping the light inside. Nothing moved. The space was empty, or seemed to be. I went back upstairs, trying to shake off the feeling. I closed the basement door behind me and locked it. Daisy followed close, nails clicking against the hardwood floor. I decided to stay in the guest room upstairs. A bright, cozy space with a big bed and soft blankets. I changed into sweatpants, turned on the small TV, and let Daisy settle near the bed. The faint sound of some old sitcom filled the room. I left the lamp on low, trying to convince myself that the weird moment downstairs had been nothing worth remembering. Sometime after midnight, I woke up. The TV was off. I didn't remember turning it off. Daisy was still on the floor, but her head was lifted, ears rigid again. A low growl rolled from her chest. I whispered her name, half asleep, but she didn't look at me. Instead, her eyes were fixed on the closet door, a sliding wooden one, slightly open, maybe 3 inches. I froze. The closet had been closed when I went to bed. My first thought was that air pressure or draft had shifted it. My second thought was something far worse. I sat up slowly, heart thudding, trying to hear anything from inside. Nothing, just the sound of Daisy's breathing and the faint creak of the house settling. I slipped off the bed quietly and took a few steps toward the closet. My pulse felt like thunder in my ears. The gap in the door looked pitch black, like a slit into somewhere else. I stopped maybe 5 feet away, crouched slightly, and tilted my head to see through the opening. For a second, I thought I was seeing a reflection until it blinked. It was an eye, a human eye staring straight at me through the gap. The shape was unmistakable, white, pupil, motionless. My body locked in place before instinct took over. I screamed, spun around, and grabbed Daisy by the collar. She yelped as I lifted her into my arms. I didn't look back. I ran through the hallway, down the stairs, and out the front door barefoot, the cold air hitting like ice. My hands shook as I dialed 911 from the emergency phone on the kitchen counter, gasping for words between sobs. The dispatcher stayed on the line while I waited outside near the mailbox, hugging Daisy to my chest. My voice trembled as I tried to explain what I'd seen. Within minutes, police cars arrived. red and blue lights washing over the house. 2 officers went in first. I watched from the driveway, shaking so hard I could barely hold the dog. One officer returned after a while and asked me to sit in the back seat of the cruiser while they finished clearing the house. Later, one of the officers told me they'd found a man hiding in the pantry closet downstairs, the same basement where Daisy had growled earlier. He'd broken in hours before, probably through the back door, and had been hiding quietly, waiting. They never explained what his intent was, and I didn't ask. They said I was lucky that the dog might have saved my life. My aunt and uncle came home the next morning. I didn't stay to meet them. I just needed to leave that house behind. Weeks later, I still woke up some nights thinking I saw that eye in the dark corner of my room. Every creak of a door or whisper of air made my heart race. Daisy's fine now, but she still barks at closets, something she never did before that weekend. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't woken up when I did. Or worse, if I hadn't brought Daisy upstairs that night. My friend Lucas asked me to watch his dog for a few days while he went out of town. The dog's name was Cooper, a big brown Labrador who had more energy than sense. He lived out in the countryside near a patch of forest. It was mid-December, and the cold was brutal. I promised I'd walk Cooper every evening before dark. When I clipped the leash onto his collar that first night, he practically dragged me down the front steps, tail wagging, as if he hadn't been outside in weeks. We followed the dirt road that ran behind the property. The air smelled of pine and smoke from distant fireplaces. My hands were already numb when Cooper froze, ears pointed, staring into the tree line. Then he barked, low and loud, pulling hard toward the woods. I tightened my grip, but the leash was old and frayed. With one sharp pull, it snapped. Cooper bolted straight into the dark forest, barking wildly. I shouted his name over and over, but his barking faded until there was only the wind and the creak of branches. I ran after him with my phone light cutting a narrow path ahead. Every few seconds, I yelled his name. Nothing, just the crunch of my boots in the snow. Finally, I stopped to listen. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, steady, not running like a dog. They circled somewhere ahead, heavy enough to sink into the frozen ground. I turned off my phone's flashlight and held my breath. The footsteps kept moving, pacing around me. I couldn't tell if it was one person or several. The forest suddenly felt endless, cold, and alive. My first thought was that it might be Cooper, but no dog makes footsteps like that. They were too slow, too deliberate. I whispered his name anyway. The sound of crunching stopped. For a full minute, the woods were silent. Then something cracked behind me, like a branch snapping. I spun around with my light, nothing there. I turned back toward the road, trying to retrace my steps. My heart was pounding so hard that I could barely think. I just needed to get out of those trees and back to the open road. The light from my phone caught something ahead, a dark shape standing upright between 2 trees. I thought it was a person, motionless, facing away from me. I called out, asking if they'd seen a dog, but no answer came. My voice sounded too loud in the stillness. I took a few steps closer, the snow crunching under my boots. The figure didn't move. Its arms hung stiffly by its sides, and there was something unnatural about the posture. That's when I realized what I was looking at wasn't alive. It was some kind of dummy, a crude mannequin made from sticks and old clothes. Its head was covered with a hood, and one sleeve hung empty, swaying slightly in the wind. I reached out and touched its shoulder. The fabric was frozen and hard as wood. Someone had built this thing deliberately and left it here. I felt the back of my neck prickle. Then, from deeper in the forest, I heard another crunch, a single step. Not far. This time, I didn't stay to check. I started running. The cold air burned my lungs, but I didn't care. I didn't look back, not once. The snow crunched behind me faster now, heavier, like something following close. I stumbled out of the trees, nearly slipping on the frozen dirt road. I ran all the way back to the house and slammed the door shut behind me, locking it twice. My chest felt tight, and my hands shook as I grabbed the phone and dialed my friend. He didn't answer. That night, I sat by the window for hours, hoping to see Cooper coming back from the woods. Nothing moved out there. The road was empty, silent except for the wind against the glass. Around 3 a.m., I finally fell asleep on the couch, phone in hand. I woke up at dawn to the same silence. No barking, no sign of Cooper. I wanted to believe he'd just run off chasing a deer, that he'd be waiting by the door later, but he never came back. When my friend came home, I told him everything. He thought I was lying until the police came and checked the woods. They found the dummy I described, hanging from a branch now, swinging slightly in the wind. No footprints around it, no sign of anyone else. The officer said it looked like a prank, but the way he said it didn't sound convinced. Cooper was officially listed as missing. My friend never spoke to me again after that. Weeks later, I had a dream. I was standing in that same forest, hearing Cooper's bark echoing through the trees, distant, weak, fading. I woke up shaking, convinced I'd actually heard it outside my window. But when I looked, all I saw was snow falling softly over the woods. I never found out who built that dummy or why. Sometimes, when the wind howls through the trees, I still hear faint barking mixed in with it like he never really left. When my neighbor, Mrs. Holloway, asked me to watch her dog for one night, I didn't think much of it. She was quiet, elderly, and a little strange, but she offered good money. The dog's name was Millie, a small white poodle mix, always yapping at everything. Mrs. Holloway insisted I stay at her house instead of bringing the dog to mine. She was very specific. Feed her once, don't let her outside after dark, and never enter her bedroom. That part felt weird, but I nodded and agreed. The house smelled old, like dust and mothballs. The spare bedroom she left for me had just a small twin bed and a desk. I fed Millie and tried to keep her from barking at every noise outside. The TV was ancient, with no HDMI ports, so I played games on my phone to pass the time. I wandered a bit, too curious. Mrs. Holloway's bedroom door was half open. Inside, old furniture, lace curtains, and a big patterned rug in the middle of the floor. It felt like stepping into another decade. By 9 o'clock, I was bored and ready to sleep. I figured Millie would stay in her owner's room since that's where she was most comfortable. I didn't care as long as she stopped barking. I turned off the lights and lay down, pulling the blanket over my head. The house was silent, except for the occasional creak of wood. Eventually, I drifted off, half listening to the faint hum of the refrigerator and the wind outside. Some time later, I woke to barking. Loud, frantic, non-stop barking. I shouted Millie's name, but she didn't stop. It sounded muffled, like she was barking from somewhere underground. I frowned. There wasn't supposed to be a basement. The sound came from the direction of Mrs. Holloway's room. My chest tightened. Every instinct told me not to go in there, but leaving a dog trapped somewhere wasn't an option. I grabbed my phone light and followed the sound. I stepped into her room and froze. The rug that had been spread across the floor earlier was rolled up against the wall, revealing a square door in the floorboards open. The barking came from below. The air coming up was cold and smelled like damp soil. My hand shook as I aimed the flashlight down, but I couldn't see anything. "Millie?" I whispered. The barking stopped instantly. Silence filled the room, thick and absolute. I waited, expecting to see the dog run up any second, but nothing happened. just silence. Then, a pale hand appeared, gripping the edge of the trapdoor. The skin looked gray, veins visible even in the dim light. I stumbled back, heart pounding so hard I thought I'd faint. The hand moved, fingers curling over the wood as something started to pull itself up. I dropped the phone and bolted from the room. I sprinted down the hallway, yelling, "Someone's in the house!" Even though nobody could hear me. My legs felt weak as I ran out the front door and across the lawn, barefoot, into the cold night. I banged on my parents' door next door until my dad opened it. I was shaking too much to speak. Once I caught my breath, I told them everything. My dad called the police right away. When the officers checked Mrs. Holloway's house, the rug was back in place. The trap door was closed. Still, they lifted it and found a crawl space filled with odd objects, candles, old jars, and what looked like children's shoes. No sign of a person or the dog. They took photos, wrote a report, and told us to stay away from that house until she returned. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that pale hand again. Mrs. Holloway came back the next morning. My dad confronted her while I waited inside. I heard her voice crack, then rise into angry shouting before turning to sobs. She kept saying, "They make noise under the floor when I'm gone." The police didn't arrest her, but they warned she needed help. She never looked at me again, just slammed her door. We never spoke again. Millie was never found. Sometimes, on quiet nights, I still imagine hearing her muffled barking coming from somewhere underground. I moved out of that town years ago, but every time I see an old rug covering a wooden floor, I wonder what might be hiding beneath it.